we're gonna try this a second time here. We got me, Matt, and Gil talking about another movie. This time, Guy Ritchie's Wrath of Man, his latest film, and this one was decided. If I correct me if I'm wrong, because well, for one, it's a fairly recent movie, and just because Matt and I had seen it and discussed it a little bit, and we thought it would be a good one for all three of us to talk about. And we're both very curious to see what Gil has to say about it as well.
Yeah, so I guess what was it'll be interesting for me to hear before I give my opinion. Like, was there anything that stood out for you about it? Because I know it's just a recent movie, and I know like we're all fans of Guy Ritchie, especially the early stuff. But was there anything
As a movie in general, you mean?
yeah, like if there was anything specific why you brought it up or it came to your mind? Because it sounded like that it was interesting enough that it's worth discussing.
Yeah. Um, well, I think uh, Matt, let me know if this sounds right. I'm thinking it was. I mean, it was just a movie we were talking about, but in terms of why choosing this one, it had less to do with the movie itself, although it is an interesting movie for sure. But more to do with our conversation and just that um, Matt seemed to really, really like the movie, and I really enjoyed it. But it was very clear that I didn't quite like it as much as he did. And that's when we thought, oh my gosh, like after having our discussion about Tenet, we were saying like we got to get Gil to see this movie so that we could talk about this.
And it is one of those things where, especially Jason and I, well, I mean, I guess the dynamic between the three of us has always been, you know, Gil on one side, Matt on the other side, and Jason in the middle. And I was always kind of wondering if Gil was going to, Gil, were going to finally be the third of us that came out and said, "Oh, well, this was absolute garbage." But I mean, the funny thing for me is that I think Jason is a bigger Guy Ritchie film than I am. I wouldn't be surprised if you, Gil, are or a bigger Guy Ritchie film fan than I am. I mean, I like Snatch. I love Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels. I really like Rock and Roller. I shouldn't say I really like Rock and Roller after I just said I like Snatch. I like Snatch better than Rock and Roller. That would get me in trouble. But um, uh, but there were a few things that stood out to me as why I think this is the best Guy Ritchie film that I've seen in a very long time. I mean, one, it's the first Guy Ritchie film movie. It was shot digitally, but the first Guy Ritchie movie that I've seen in a very long time that I even wanted to see. I mean, the King Arthur movie just didn't appeal to me. I had a passing interest in Man from Uncle, but it just was never something that I really wanted to jump off the couch and go see. I didn't
Just
even
for
know that he
context,
directed Aladdin, but
that was you at 2008.
yeah,
Just for context, the Rock and Roll
yeah,
was 2008, so that means it's been about 13 years since you've had a really good interest in a Guy Ritchie movie.
yeah, and and then finally, after all of those movies, I come into this, and okay, so the funny thing is, my local movie theater that was showing it, when I went to go buy my tickets, actually listed it as an action comedy. And if you're somebody who hasn't seen Wrath of Man and you just see Guy Ritchie, you do think Rock and Roller, you do think the Sherlock Holmes movies, you do think Snatch, you do think Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels, you can understand why somebody would come into the movie with that without assumption, and just like social media person, whatever puts it up there. Oh, it's the new action comedy by Guy Ritchie. There was maybe one chuckle in the theater, the entire film. Uh, I mean, it's really dark. It's really brutal.
I
But
mean, he's got some dry humor, like Jason Statham there, like when he's doing
yeah,
his like I'm a nobody role,
yeah,
in the
Yeah.
yeah, and it was fun that he was only ever referred to as H for the majority of the movie. But it was also just a stylistic break from Guy Ritchie. Like he built his career off of like overcranking the cameras, undercranking, uh, high contrast, stylized, desaturated, almost monochromatic at times, grainy, um, you know, very, very kind of music video kinds of filmmaking. And, this was a movie where he finally took a breath and showed that he could do something else,
Well,
at
yeah.
least for me.
It
Uh,
definitely, I definitely agree that it's at least in terms of the kind of stuff you were just mentioning, it's definitely a little toned down from the ultra stylish stuff that he's done in the past.
I think that's definitely something that stood out immediately, and that was going to be my next question. Is like, but I'll first address the like I'll agree about the one thing I immediately noticed that it was from the first shot. It was going for this very point of view type of like keeping the camera in one position or just moving very slowly with the action. And so I noticed that right away, and then it went one step further with the non-linear, like going back in time from different perspectives and showing all the pieces of the puzzle. So it was definitely doing something different there. He's done puzzle pieces before. Um,
Yeah.
and I guess
yes.
Jason, you could attest to that more, because you've probably seen more of his recent movies than me, for sure. I'm not sure about Matt,
Yeah.
but how much is this a departure from his more recent ones? Because it does seem like he basically said like, hey, you know what? I've made a few movies. Some were more successful than others, but let's really like swing for the fences, stylistically speaking. So he kind of like it feels like he really committed to something with this one. That's not my final verdict about the movie, but at least stylistically, I'll say that it's got something going on. Like it's tried to do something for sure.
Yeah. I definitely I have not seen the movie he made 2 years ago, The Gentleman. That's what I was trying to see today. It's the one with Matthew McConaughey. I've actually not met someone yet who has seen it, so it's kind of frustrating. For all I know, it's fantastic, but I haven't really. I don't know what the reviews are or anything on that one. It kind of was a sleeper for me. Other than that, I have seen all of his movies except for the King Arthur one, just because the trailers looked so bad. I had no interest in seeing that one. And then way back early in his career, like right after, I think probably right after he married Madonna or something like that, he made some movie called Swept Away, which I've also not seen. But other than that, the rest of his movies, Lock, Stock, Snatch, um, that BMW short film that he did, the
Oh yeah.
Revolver, Rock and Rolla, Sherlock Holmes, Sherlock Holmes 2, Man from Uncle, and Aladdin. I have seen. I mean, like you were saying, there's um, I definitely don't think I'm trying to think back through all these movies. I don't think I've seen anything him. I don't think I've seen him do anything where he's like jumping around in time to help tell the story, I mean, obviously the obvious example is like say in a Tarantino-esque way, but that's obviously an oversimplification. But yeah, I don't know. I think that you definitely see his traits in this movie. It's just it does feel like a kind of a new thing for him, at least somewhat anyway.
So I guess to maybe to parse out a bit, What do you think is the differences? Like, because you said Matt liked it more or
Oh,
less?
I'm trying to remember what we initially said because we didn't want to talk about it too much with since we wanted to talk to you as well about it.
Yeah,
Um,
so
but
we'll get into it.
I guess all it was, if I could sum it up a little too much here, I would say something to the effect of Matt called me and said, "You got to see this movie. It's so good. It's like the best movie that Guy Ritchie's made in like in over a
Oh,
decade."
well, so he gave you the recommendation, and it was a
Well,
warm
I was
recommendation.
already gonna see it. I mean, I
Yeah,
love
yeah,
Jason Statham, and I'm a big fan of Guy Ritchie, so I was like, I'm totally gonna see this movie. I was just very late to seeing it because I was stuck in a small town far from here. Anyway, that didn't have a movie theater. But yeah, I eventually saw it, and yeah, I was determined to see this movie because it looked really cool. But yeah, he was really into it. When I watched it, I had expectations like, okay, Guy Ritchie movie, Jason Statham movie, based on what Matt spoke about earlier, action comedy, stuff like that. And I'm like, okay, this is gonna be exciting. Gotta go see this. And I'm thinking kind of like Snatch, is what I'm basically walking into. And I was very intrigued, and I was like, okay, we got a little bit of this like you know, uh, bank robber. We got a little bit of Heat stuff going on here, but like not at all like Heat. Very different, very different approach to all this stuff, storytelling wise. And I'm kind of going along with the story, and I don't know, somewhere around maybe like the halfway point or something, I was intrigued by the story, but I wasn't super entertained by it. There was even moments where I was kind of like, gosh, this thing just keeps on going. But I didn't really see all the pieces being put together because by the end, the last 40 minutes or so, when they've finally introduced the competing bank robbery team, I guess you could say, the other characters that finally
Mhm.
get introduced. They spend so much time on them. You get to know them really well, and I just didn't see where it was all going because while I was a little frustrated with the movie, just because it wasn't what I was expecting, by the last like 40 minutes, I was just like, yeah, and I was like really engaged because I think the ending saves the film in a big way.
Yeah, actually, I mean, and we can get into story structure, like the actual structure of the movie at one point. We need to get into
Yes.
that at one point because that is so integral to how well this movie works.
Right.
At least for me, and I think for you, it, uh, in that like it wouldn't have the same impact if it were told chronologically in any way.
I mean, I think somewhere out there, there's
Uh,
an amazing director who could pull something like that off and find a way
yeah,
to make it incredible. But I would definitely say that the way it's told, not just the sequencing
yeah,
being non chronological, but also the way that it's so like 100% on him all the time. It's a very like almost PO, not literally POV, but like the story is just from his point of view really until we finally get to that stage. It's all that stuff, those choices, those storytelling choices. I think
yeah.
definitely helped the movie, as you just said.
Now, this just popped into my brain, and this is probably going to sound
Catch it.
really dumb.
Okay.
Really dumb.
Swing and a miss.
You mentioned Heat.
Yeah.
This movie is not Heat.
No, not at all.
There are parallels to be drawn.
Yeah.
In fact, a shocking amount of parallels to be drawn. I think you could argue that the opening heist sequence in Wrath of Man actually bears some real resemblance to the opening heist sequence in Heat, just
Of
told from
course.
the opposite perspective.
Absolutely.
Just entirely off the wall. You think about Jason Statham's character, and the fact that like this is a guy who is just doing his thing and he's successful at it. I mean, it's later in the movie that you turn out that he's doing the exact same thing that got his son killed by somebody else.
Yes.
And on the other side, you start with the good guys, and they eventually devolve into, well, and most of them don't even devolve into the bad guys. That's the great thing. You know, like, at least not a badder guy than him. There's at least some gray area. So
Yeah.
I think that's another parallel to Heat that you can draw. I mean, like you're dealing with characters who are flawed. They're not really as mysterious in Heat. You kind of know who you're getting.
Yes.
But there's always this kind of geez, I don't want to say yin yang but there's like this. They're almost like kindred spirits in a weird way.
Okay.
But they're in conflict with each other. But I mean actually it's more like a Freudian narcissism of small differences thing
Okay.
in some ways for me. But I mean, I think that there's actually a lot more heat in this movie than maybe is apparent. It's not as good as Heat.
No, not at all.
It's not even in the same ballpark. I mean, Heat
I don't
is
think
one
any
of
of
my
us think.
right. I mean, Heat is one of the top 5 movies ever made. Wrath of Man is like
That is
Is one of the top 5 Guy Ritchie movies ever made.
right.
funny that this actually comes up in the users list of like robbery movies, because I'm looking at the page for like Wrath of Man, and like Heat is like the poster for the robbery movies list. But yeah,
How
that's
appropriate.
it's definitely, let's just say, as far as robbery action movies, it's probably makes the top 5. Yeah, I mean, like in my case, I do like it, but top 5 of all time, that would be very, very high praise.
Yeah.
Do you remember, Matt, I kind of mentioned briefly when we were discussing this at a very short time earlier, that one of the things that made me like this movie was that it just shared a few characteristics, like we're saying, these kind of like surface characteristics with Heat, but also with another movie that I thought was like a pretty big failure of a movie, which was the Gerard Butler movie Den of Thieves.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, not to go into it or anything, but just very briefly, like I also love Gerard Butler. I think he's like one of the best like action movie type guys that are still making action movies today. And I saw this movie on some streaming thing or whatever, and I wanted to love it. Like I really, really wanted to like it. And just like what we're talking about with this film, with Wrath of Man, it starts out with like an armored car heist, and just like what we're discussing, these surface similarities. There's these two teams, that one of them's cops, one of them's the robbers, and there's kind of this whole thing of trying to like portray them as like similar even though they're different, kind of thing. Just basically failing miserably at what Heat achieved wonderfully. you
Yeah.
know and I tried to love this movie because I like Gerard Butler. I want to give it a chance, And I got about like 35 minutes, 40 minutes into the movie, and I just lost all interest and just turned it off, which doesn't happen that often. I watch crap like Thanksgiving and the Velocipaster and stuff like that. So but yeah, like
Good names there.
yeah, the this Guy Ritchie movie, Wrath of Man, while I was a little frustrated with it being so different than what I expected, by the time the movie was done, I was just like, holy hell, it may not be Heat, but it's definitely a lot better than that Den of Thieves movie I almost finished watching.
Yeah.
That's funny. So it seems like Matt's recommendations slightly like reduced your enthusiasm for it once you watch it, but the movie you saw before it or close to it helped elevate it a bit. So
Yeah, by the time
yeah,
I was done watching it, I was like, holy hell, that was a hell of a lot better than that turd.
yeah, I guess perspective matters.
Uh,
Yes.
well,
Just what the
the
movie's
thing is,
about, kind of.
It is a little weird though for me to think about like Heat and and Wrath of Man being referred to as heist movies. I mean, they are movies that involve heists,
Right. They're not in that same what would you call it, like
but
that
it's not Ocean's 11
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
or The Score or something like that. I mean,
It's a device for what it was.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And um, I mean, fundamentally, Wrath of Man is
It's a
your
revenge.
classic revenge. Yeah, it's a revenge movie.
Yeah.
Uh, it just so happens that he's taking revenge for something that happened during a heist. But I mean, so much about all of these movies that try to fall into this. Uh, well, I mean, obviously, this isn't even cop and robber genre. When
Not
we're talking
really.
about Wrath of Man, um, but like these warring factions and so on and so forth. So much about what makes okay, and this is what made Wrath of Man stand out to me over so many other movies that kind of talk about or try to explore these kind of uh, the gutter of civilization where these people are making seriously good livings over the misery of others,
Yeah.
killing each other mercilessly, and so on and so forth. And just imagine if Guy Ritchie had shot this movie like he did Snatch,
Okay.
or even if you go halfway. It's like a fast cutting. Going in on the insert of the gun. He pulls the trigger. Guy, slow motion, blood splatter. The violence suddenly, even though it's still gratuitous, isn't as grotesque or shocking. It just becomes gratuitous, and I mean, like that's something that Guy Ritchie has done so much in his past, was doing that kind of like that glorification kind of
Yeah,
through the camera.
you're talking about like in his previous movies the violence is more entertaining, whereas in this one it's a little more shocking.
Yeah, I mean, like when they're walking through that porn set,
Yes.
uh, and it's just one shot
Yeah.
in and out. Just you got that naked dude lying on the floor. How old are those girls? Not old enough.
Bam bam.
Emotionless. Just shoots the guy in the back, kills him, done. Out.
Yeah.
You know, and like all the blood splatter in the world isn't going to make a scene that violent. I mean, that is a violent scene. And it's not because of how much blood is on the screen. It's just because it's slow, it's methodical, it's calculated.
Yeah.
He's made a very cerebral, not passionate, very cerebral decision to kill a guy very dispassionately, and he walks off like it's nothing. And we're watching it in a very dispassionate, from a very dispassionate point of view.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, so I'll say, as far as like my reaction to it, is
Yeah. What do you
that,
think overall?
yeah, overall, I think I liked it. I mean, I liked it well enough. I appreciated what it was trying to do with the point of view, with the non-linear, like going back, showing it from a different perspective or a different part of the story. It was interesting when it shifted point of view completely to the military guys, the ex-military guys, and their story. It's basically a movie about villains. Like everybody's a villain. Like the ex-military guy are villains. Jason Statham is obviously a villain, and even the nicest guy of the bunch.
Josh Hartnett?
Oh no, the other guy, Bullet something or whatever.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Bullet like
Yeah.
becomes like, spoiler alert, of course. Like becomes like the bad guy, the mastermind in the end. Even though like one thing I'll say, they did a good job like of like, the whole usual suspects thing, like where Josh Hartnett like
yeah,
comes off as like he's probably the mole, like the person that's feeding
yeah.
information, and then it ends up being
Almost
the
certainly.
nicest guy. Like it was a nice diversion. So I give them credit. I didn't spot that. I totally was gonna go. It seemed too obvious, but I was like, yeah, but then this movie is kind of obvious. It's been till now, so I wouldn't be surprised if it went that route. So yeah, and that's the biggest thing I would say as far as criticism is that ultimately kind of reminded me of like talking about Christopher Nolan again, like The Prestige in a way. Like The Prestige was a very impressive movie, and it was very elaborate and clever on how it set everything up. But then pretty much the last 40 minutes, you already knew what's happening. Like, and it kind of felt like it was repeating itself a bit too much.
Mm,
Like I knew where it was going, and similar with this movie is like I know he's gonna get the guy who killed his kid. The question, how is it gonna happen? They'll probably be like clever in how they go about it. Like he doesn't do anything during the actual heist. He just keeps his eye out, sees who he needs to see, and then he's gonna come like from out of nowhere and like kill him. That's all fine and good, and maybe slightly clever because it didn't go like the the obvious route,
Mhm.
but you knew that was happening. I didn't see too much value beyond that aside from the fact that everybody's a villain, like as some sort of statement about like we are who we are. Like, soldiers are soldiers. They need a war. They need something to fight for, whether it's a good cause or a bad cause. And the bad guy, like Jason Statham, like his character is he's got his own goals, but at the same time, once he's very single-minded. He does what he
yeah,
does, and he does it really well. And once his kid gets killed, then that's what he's doing,
yeah.
and nothing's gonna come in his way. Like so, it's kind of like a movie almost about professionalism.
Mm,
About like I think one of the reviews I'm kind of
Yeah.
like glazing over them as we speak, and one of them it says like the ultimate sin of Wrath of Man is that it doesn't realize it's really a story about pride. you know,
mm.
that it's kind and that kind of like I think it rings somewhat true to me. It's something a bit of a we spoke last time about like No Country for Old Men, and
Yeah,
the villain in that movie, what's his name, Shagur.
So yeah.
Yeah, so like how single-minded he is, how much pride and honor code he has. So it seems like this movie has a little bit of that, just not it's not the main point of the movie. It's just that
yeah.
um it's kind of like mixed in there. I found it interesting. I don't know. You said something about maybe I've missed this or maybe I did notice it, but I forgot by now. Is what happens in the end? Like somebody, is there like a kid that dies in the end because he's trying to kill the guy who killed his kid, or what was the thing that kind of like flips the script in the end?
Oh, I don't know if there was any one particular moment. I just you talking about when I was are you asking about when I was saying how the ending kind of like saved the movie?
Oh no, that's the one thing. But I think Matt said something about
Oh,
how that it also ultimately about a person that's trying to avenge the death of their child, but ends up getting another child killed, something like that. Or
No,
is
oh
that?
no, no.
Oh no.
I don't believe that's what I said, but if I
Oh, okay.
did, I misspoke. I think what I said was he was avenging the death of his child, and then later in the movie, you find out that it was actually his very career that got his son killed because of the structure of the film.
Oh,
Like
yeah. You mean
because you
that's what
find
like.
out that he was doing the same job.
yeah,
Yeah, but
He
that was discovered like, and this is another thing that's like also kind of like a prestige like moment because that's discovered like halfway through the movie. It's not
yeah,
towards the end, like because when
uh,
they show the backstory, that's like about the halfway point of the movie of
yeah,
like how he got to where he got and what he when they started slowly peeling off his motivation, like.
yeah, I got the chronology wrong in that one sentence that I was ranting through. So yes,
Yeah.
I take
Okay,
correction.
so I just wanted to clarify because I
Yes,
was like, did I miss
yeah,
something?
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, clarification taken. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that a little bit of what Matt was talking about it and stuff like that that I just found really interesting, I guess, was just that it's definitely not an original thing. There's other movies that have done this as well, but it's kind of ballsy, I guess, that the central character that you're following, his entire crew that are obviously very loyal to him and everything like that. They're we're following him, so we're kind of on board. We want him to find out who got his son killed. We want him to get his vengeance if possible. But slowly over the course of his whole they show the steps that he took before deciding to just go on his own and you know and do what he does throughout the rest of the movie, which is to kind of go undercover in a way. But before all of that, you know, um, we we get to see all the steps he's taking to try and find to get information about who he needs to go kill and everything. And we see that he is running his own crew, his own bank robbery crew, and really like Matt alluded to earlier, that he's not really any better than them. He's not a more moral person. You know, he's he's probably a little bit better at his job than they, at robbing stuff than they are. But it's kind of a ballsy, way to make your movie that these aren't really good people at all.
And also, by the way, I'm glad that the way that I said the chronology was wrong, because I can't imagine a more cloying, melodramatic bullshit ending than somehow structuring it as like the last reveal at the end that all this time Jason Statham was always doing the same jobs that these guys were doing.
Mm.
I mean, like, no, you have to know that earlier in the movie. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of melodramatic bullshit at the end to try to get a cheap, moment, which would have been really bad. The
I
fact
mean, look,
that
someone could have done it. I don't really know. I think it would have cheapened it, like you said, but I don't know if it's impossible.
I don't know if it's impossible, but I mean, it would be very hard to give you context. And but I mean, no, I think it goes on the ride with the movie
Yeah,
that, okay, we've been entirely on board with this person. There are a few like red flags, right? Well, yeah, I mean, a large part of the first portion of the movie is you kind of looking at Jason Statham through the eyes of the other security force guys.
sure.
Like, who the fuck is this dude? Like, I mean, you're watching him barely pass his tests, and deliberately barely passing his tests, barely qualifying. They give you that first action sequence with Post Malone for God knows why, and suddenly he reveals himself to be a superhuman killing machine. Okay, questions. We don't have the answers, just like the guys around him don't have the answers. So you're getting suspicious along with Bullet and what Baby Sweat, what Josh Hartnett,
Boy,
um, Boy Sweat, and Boy Sweat, yeah. It's uh, between Bullet and Baby Farks McGeezax.
And what's her name? The girl like reminded me of Starbucks from what's it
yeah.
called?
She
Battlestar
gave,
Galactica.
she reminded me of that too.
Dana?
Her
Yeah,
character's name is Dana, I think.
Yeah. And I was
yeah,
actually gonna ask. Oh, well, good. Finish your thought first, man.
yeah, uh, but yeah, I mean, going into that next portion of the movie where, like, okay, now you're kind of getting a little bit of context for this. After those two sequences, now the audience knows as much as Jason Statham and as much as his fellow security team, and then holy shit, now we're getting information from an entirely different point of view, and it all culminates into this one conversion between all three perspectives.
Right.
And I mean, I guess that's where, as I said before, we had to talk about story structure, and we're already talking about it. But um, I mean, I thought it was kind of neat how the movie kept us in the dark.
It wasn't shot on
About
film.
right, yeah, about Jason Statham. Then it kept us in the dark. Still kept us in the dark about the crew who ended up killing his kid. It answered a lot of questions that we had before, and then finally, we get into this this third, I don't want to say tangential portion where we're dealing with the military guys, and suddenly when you add all that information together, put it all together, there is just something that clicks about how, like, if the movie were laid out chronologically, it wouldn't have worked as well dramatically, but it would have all made sense. And there's finally this. I almost feel like the movie was built around context more than, well, I mean, obviously not built around chronology, but more built around relevant events, but whether or not they happened at the same time.
But yeah, I guess I'll concur. I'll say like it is interesting that there's like three perspective. The one that's the, I guess, real time, you would say, where like it's him being a mystery, which is mostly just to keep it interesting and
Yeah.
mysterious. And then there's his point of view of
Mhm.
like how he goes out with his kid for a day out, that stuff happens. And then the third one is the ex-military guys and their point of view and how they essentially on a collision course with him, whether it's when they kill his kid and whether it's later on when in the climax. So it's definitely it's clever, but it's not over the top. Like it's not hyper over the top, like we said. Like it's definitely an interesting choice to make it very deliberate and
Yeah.
very contained, like very disciplined. So it's and I think you're right. It's what makes the movie interesting. It would not be interesting if it was linear. It would not be as interesting if it was like hyper Guy Ritchie stuff. Like and I think it shows maturity by him that like
Yeah.
what, I've done that thing and this is just gonna be another one and another iteration. Let me do this one differently, because there might be something here that's worth slowing down for,
Yeah.
and I think that's what sets it apart. Ultimately, if I have to give my verdict, I still don't see much like substance in it. Like, and it is a bit predictable. It's got some good diversions, but ultimately, like once you know that he's, I mean, a lot of movies you know where they're gonna go, but this one specifically, I felt like I almost felt like there's not gonna be. I didn't even have any satisfaction when he got the guy. I mean, the guy was a jerk. He was a loose cannon, but is he worse than Jason Statham? I'm not sure. If I had to choose between him and Jason Statham, like surviving in the world, I might choose the jerk. Like
Scott Eastwood.
Jason Statham is way more dangerous for the world and a way bigger villain. And maybe that's ultimately what's remotely interesting about the movie is that like I don't even like relate too much to his relationship with his son. None of that was like done very effectively.
Yeah.
He's just a bad guy. He's got some emotions. He's got some feelings to his biological kid. So I'm assuming he's gonna want to kill whoever killed his kid. But all that, just really doesn't do it for me. The only thing that's interesting about it is that ultimately he's the worst of the bunch, but he's the most enigmatic. He's the most interesting. Like he's the most skilled. He's the most deliberate, and that's why and it's also his point of view. So we root for him to some degree, or at least go along for the ride with him. But ultimately, he's the one we should get rid of. Like that's so that's like my takeaway. But
A
I
fair
do
assessment.
agree. Sorry.
It's definitely a fair assessment.
Yeah, and I'll say like I probably would not have seen this movie like unless somebody told me like, you know what, yeah, it's another Guy Ritchie action movie, but these are the reasons you should see it. Like if somebody was selling me this movie, it would be best to sell me on like, oh, it's got like wonders and it's like following the action and it's got like a non-linear like spin to it that's kind of interesting and not gimmicky per se. And then I was like, you know what? I'll give it a shot. Like I'll see it sometime. Like but otherwise what's scene to scene, moment to moment action, all that stuff, none of it was tremendous. So like
Uh,
mhm.
Jason, I know that you've been quiet and I've talked, but I just want to push back a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, because I think Gil actually might have made this movie more interesting to me than it was in his argument that it wasn't very interesting.
I
Because
do that
like
sometimes.
Go
Yeah.
on.
right, so um, I mean, well, okay, so between H and Jan, who really is the more dangerous person? Well, okay, well, actually, that's the thing. I it is a really difficult question to answer. I would say H. Well, no, I wouldn't say H. Sorry, I would say Jan is the more dangerous person because H, even though he has, actually, you know what? I don't know, and here's why I don't know. H is dangerous because he has a sense of morals, but they're screwed up. Jan is dangerous because he's a psychopath.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
think
So,
I agree. I mean, I like thinking about it again now. It's obviously I was just blurting out words, but yes, ultimately, when you think about it, like we said, they're all villains, and it's basically the movie is like, which villain would you choose?
Yeah.
right,
And it is true that ultimately, even though Age is the most dangerous of the bunch, he is the most, he's the least greedy, because
He's in more
there's
control.
greed. He's the least
yeah.
greedy. He's the least loose cannon. He's very, very focused.
His team trusts him.
Yeah, he's very trustworthy. It's just that it happens to be that at his line of work, he has to kill people sometimes. It's almost like he's the only one of the bunch where that's like an unfortunate side effect. Um,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
it doesn't come off that way on the surface because during this movie he's trying to like avenge his son's death and he hurts a lot of people in the process. So maybe
yeah.
that's what like maybe sidetracked me in thinking that. But I do think you make a good point that there's
Well,
something about this movie where like you got to pick your villain. Like there's a lot of bad people in the world, but if you have to choose one, choose the one that's not a psychopath and it's not greedy and it's just doing it to make a living, essentially, to have a
well,
life.
I mean, to make another parallel to Heat, I mean, which villain would you rather choose, Macaulay or Waingro? I mean,
I don't remember which one Macaulay is.
Macaulay was Robert De Niro.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I don't know either. But, oh,
Uh,
and the other one
but
was Val Kilmer, right?
Wayne is
no, no,
the one that's
no.
that's the that that's murdering the young underage prostitute that he
I
sleeps
see.
with. He's the one who screws up the heist at the beginning.
Okay.
His
Oh,
Yeah,
name's
oh, yeah. Got it.
right. Because H strikes me as the guy who would do the heist, but he would go into it with like, okay, as few deaths as we can possibly be responsible for. And I think they back that up again with that scene on the porn set where. And maybe it's just because Jason Statham's character H has so much clout, in this underground that he knows that he can leave living witnesses and still in that environment and still be okay. Where he is just going through and saying, well, these guys aren't guilty of killing my son, but they're all really fucking bad guys. So he's going through killing them. Whereas Jane on the other side,
Yeah.
kills the two security guys, and then sees this kid lying there who saw his face, and then just decides to murder him. I mean, you are left with the question whether or not Jason Statham in that same situation would have killed the kid who just saw his face.
Hard to
But
say.
yeah, but after that, you see Jane turning against his entire team so he can make off with all the money.
Yeah.
Whereas you have no evidence that Jason Statham would do that. So
Yeah, I mean, one thing I was gonna ask before I forget is what was the deal with the when he had sex with the woman with I guess Dana was her name?
Yeah.
yeah,
The like what was the deal there? Like that she like kept some money for herself and
Oh,
stuff. Like
that was basically he's working his. That was just showing him working his way through the armored car employees, trying to find out who was the informer that would lead him
oh,
to the killer. So
because
when,
if she's like stealing money, she might be selling
yeah,
information too.
he thought it was payoff money, so he sleeps with her, finds it, searches her house, finds it, then he wakes her up to confront her about it, and when he decides that he believes her and she's just skimming money for herself, doing, basically she has stolen some money that doesn't belong to her, rather than she's not in any way connected with what he's doing. He just says, keep the money, don't tell anybody anything, and you won't. I'm not going to kill you.
And what was the Andy Garcia angle? Is he kind of like a government
That's
person?
okay, Matt. We didn't talk about that the other day. We were discussing. I was trying to tell Matt the other day the one thing that kind of frustrated me about the movie, with certain things being unclear, and I didn't even mention that part. But yeah, I thought it was clear who he was. I just didn't think they did a great job explaining. Like, I feel like they could have spent a few more minutes with Andy Garcia, so we could have gotten a little more story there. But yeah, he's plays a character called Agent King, and the way I understand it is that was his starting point. Was Jason Statham goes to him to get a list of people who most likely would either have been involved or would know who was involved, and that's where he starts going down that list and killing people.
I see, but he's not like a government agent or anything.
I
He's
think
he's
he
just like
is.
a what?
He's involved with the government on some level, probably FBI or something like that.
FBI. Oh, okay, because that's what I felt like the whole thing about like the hand like looking after the chicken coop or whatever the thing. Because
Yeah,
when they're talking about like Jason Statham is the one that steals money from these like companies, the armored car companies,
yeah,
but he's like now joined them for a different reason.
yeah.
And so they're talking as if like they basically have connections with the government in order to steal money, and maybe there's payout to like the government agents to like
It's not super clear. I
yeah.
just remember there's the part where he specifically hands him a list, and there's a line where Andy Garcia says something to the effect of, I'm going to mess this up. I don't remember how he says it exactly, but he kind of says to him like, you've got this much time, and I'm just going to back off, and you do whatever you want, because these people on this list are so bad that if any of them get killed, I'm not going to sweat it, kind of thing, you know. And then
Yeah.
I I believe there's a moment where he says, up to a point, I can turn my back, but if things start getting messy, it's going to come back on me if I don't do something, or something like that. I don't remember what, but the gist of it that I got was that he's an FBI agent who would be overseeing that kind of investigation, and he realized that Jason Statham, this bad guy, is going to be killing off a whole bunch of terrible people, and I think he just turned his back on it and just allowed it to happen.
Well, but also that in some ways, and this maybe goes back to the different types of villains, that like maybe Jason Statham is the type of villain that the FBI uses
Like an informant.
as informant, while and the payoff is that they allow them to steal a ton of money by providing them information.
I mean, it's definitely
From
happened in
banks
the
that
past.
are insured and whatever, and the government takes care of it, whatever. Like there's a lot of money, so
Yeah.
that kind of a thing. Yeah, but I mean, I'll give it props overall. Like if nothing else, we spoke about it close to an hour now, so
Yeah.
that is impressive. Like that there's anything like much to talk about. But yeah, so I mean, I guess I don't know, like maybe how would you rank it? Like mostly because I'm just curious, just because like out of 10, just because you and Matt seem to both like it, but maybe the degree is just different.
That's a good question. Like on a 1 to 10 scale, I mean, certainly I really enjoyed it a lot. I'd say like a solid 8.
You said an 8?
Yeah, like a solid 8. Yeah.
Wow, I must have done a number on you because I was going to say a 7.
There you
I
go.
think Jason's ranking is just more forgiving.
Yeah, it's probably is.
Yeah.
Not to get away from the that part of the conversation, but just before I
Let's just say
forget, I
meet
also
at 7.5 or something. Go ahead.
I wanted to just mention a few things, like probably some of the best acting I've seen from Scott Eastwood. I really
Oh,
like,
definitely. Yeah.
and I expect good acting from Josh Hartnett because I like Josh Hartnett. I just think that he's been terribly cast throughout most of his career in so many questionable movies or questionable casting choices. But his character Boy Sweat was it wasn't an incredible character or anything, and I think it's easier at least for his to do that character than it probably would be for Scott Eastwood's character Jan, just because Josh Hartnett gets the great character that everybody loves. It's hard not to love him. He starts out as a total dick, and then he's like redeemed at the end by being the only one really with any
Yeah.
balls. So I mean, like that he did great. It's hardly even worth mentioning because it's like I expect it from Josh Hartnett. He's so great, and everything. But also this guy, I didn't know his name until I saw this movie. I looked him up, but I knew his face. But Jeffrey Donovan, he plays the
Yeah.
leader of the military guys.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, he's done a lot of television and stuff, and he was in a few other movies. But I think he's like severely underused. I think that he could probably be doing bigger and better parts than he is.
Yeah, I certainly think that the movie was well cast, and I mean the performances were generally surprisingly good. I don't think as highly of Josh Hartnett apparently as you do. I mean I
You mean in
like him.
general or this
Okay.
movie?
No, well, no. I mean, in terms of in general, in this
Oh,
movie, he just really surprised me.
yeah.
I thought that he was really solid.
I should
Um,
clarify because you brought that up and it's worth mentioning. In general, I find Josh Hartnett very likable.
yeah,
That was good casting
he
for him.
Yeah.
yeah, he just shouldn't have been in Sin City.
Yeah,
What?
maybe.
Oh, jeez, come on.
Tiny part? He's just fine.
Yes, he was just fine.
No, but I'll agree that like if nothing else, especially with like Jason Statham's character like kind of being as prominent as it is,
Yeah.
and magnetic, like I do feel like that like the whole like the all the roles were like well cast, like were memorable enough for what they needed to be. I did feel like Josh Hartnett was like a bit. I mean, it was a very generic character, but yes, it has that flip towards the end, so it's all good. He's basically, I guess, the only good guy in the end. He's just like a bit of
Yeah.
a shithead, but like, but in a good sort of way. At least he's a good guy. but
Dana's not bad, but she did steal some money.
yeah, which ultimately I think again goes back to the whole thing, like most of the world is made of villains. The question is like, what's what's a better villain to be stuck with?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, no, it's all very curious, and I don't know, like, that might be an interesting subject. We don't have to go too deep into it, but like it is interesting because they kind of say about like how like the high functioning psychopaths don't end up in jail, they end up becoming CEOs. Like how like that it is true that like a lot of people who are like kind of twisted in the head and don't have like lack certain characteristic succeed a lot in other aspects of life because they're just very well tuned to like how to manipulate people, how to manipulate situations to their advantage. And so it is kind of like an interesting subject. There might be a better movie to make about that in general,
Definitely.
but
Yeah.
but yeah, no, it's interesting, and I just think that like this movie didn't go too far on the subject, but it seems like on the surface that's what it's about. It's like if anything, because when you're comparing the Den of Thieves, right? I feel like it's like this should have been called Den of Villains. Like it
Yeah.
just feels like it's the whole movie's about villains top to bottom with few redeeming characters, and but maybe it just didn't go far enough to have it be like you know something out of the ordinary. But I give it high marks for like style and all that. So I would probably inch toward like a 7. I would want to give it a 7, especially for like an action movie. But like I would probably put it like 6, like 6.5, something like that. It's like higher than average, but I might go for a 7 just because of the it was trying to do something a little different, even though
Well,
we've
Yeah.
seen the
since
movie
we did
before.
this on the last one, where and since Guy Ritchie is such a household name director and stuff, where would you rank this among his other films that you've seen?
Yeah, so it's tough because unlike you, I've seen very few of them. So, I mean, I think I've only seen like Snatch, Lock, Stock, and Sherlock Holmes, pretty much. But
You
um,
didn't
I,
see the second Sherlock Holmes?
I didn't see the second one. No, I don't think so.
Mm, I think it was
But
better.
but you know what? I liked Sherlock Holmes, but I maybe there would be a tie for me with Sherlock Holmes, just because it's a very different movie. But like they're both doing something a little different. I mean, Sherlock Holmes was done really well. It's just that it was Guy Ritchie. It was Guy Ritchie doing Sherlock Holmes, so there was like no surprise there.
Right. Right.
This I feel like it was trying to be a bit different. So I would have to see at least 2, 3 more of his movies to like make it really matter. Because obviously Snatch and Lock, Stock are I will say one thing that's curious about Guy Ritchie. The whole thing with Lock, Stock, and Snatch is always interesting because I had this theory when I was younger. Like it seems like whichever one of those two you saw first is your favorite one.
I agree. Well, at least that's what
Like
I've been told from people, and I like Snatch a little bit better than Lock, Stock, and I did see it first.
yeah, exactly. And I often like I used to debate people like it's not just because I saw it first. It's also because it is more entertaining, it's more polished, it's got more going on, and it's got Brad Pitt and it's like a superstar cast and everything. Like it's just got more going on. Lock, Stock is like a clever indie movie, basically. Like a
Matt, which one do
clever.
you like better?
I actually have to say the same. Snatch, and I saw it first.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I guess we're all
Interesting.
unfortunate that like, we're stuck in probably in the same bubble because none of us saw
Yeah.
Lock, Stock first.
And again, it's really close, but
No,
you
I
know,
love them both. I just I find the Lock, Stock is really great, and the friends, the group of friends, what is 4 or 5 of them? I can't remember. They're all very fun, interesting characters, but they're kind of like a big unit of like 3 or 4 friends, and
yeah,
they all sort of work together. A few of them stand out a little more than the others, but there's nothing wrong with that. It's just it's good, right? There's something about Snatch that's just really excellent in that, like, you've got Jason Statham and his partner, and you've got Brad Pitt and the other Pikeys, and you've got the crazy Russian, and you've got Dennis Farina's story. Well, he's trying to track down the diamond. You got the three black guys that they hired to steal the diamond and their whole story, and it's like there's all these different groups that all converge beautifully at the end of the movie. I just find it more fun, more interesting, even though both are very excellent.
Yeah.
It's kind of like it's exactly almost like Tarantino. Like it's as if like he made Reservoir Dogs and then he just imploded with like in Reservoir Dogs is amazing, but then all of a sudden he comes out with Pulp Fiction
Very
and
good comparison.
it just opens like it's like a kaleidoscope of storytelling compared to Lock, Stock, which is really solid, really good, but it's very confined to this
Yeah,
the
Yeah.
one group of friends
yeah,
and
that's an excellent comparison for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I mean I think
Matt,
it's
where would you place it?
oh yeah,
Three.
ranking.
3,
Three. Yeah.
but behind Lock, Stock, and Snatch.
Correct.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, where will you rank it? I guess you
I
have like
I mean, I'm literally looking at his filmography here, trying to figure that out. I would put probably Snatch first, and then uh, Lock, Stock, but then very very shortly after that, not that we need to make a episode about this or anything, but I'd be curious, Gil, to see what you say about what you think about Rock and Rolla, because that one is very much in the same vein as those first two that he made, but kind of a little more polished, I think, maybe. But anyway, that one's really cool too. I would probably put that as his third because I just love it so much. I think it'd be somewhere around there, like around fourth or something, because it's hard to say. I think I liked it a little more than the Sherlock Holmes movies, and I loved Man from Uncle. I mean, I really really loved Man from Uncle, but I don't think it. I just think it's maybe a little bit. It's like right in that range, right around there. Both of those movies would be just a little bit higher than the Sherlock Holmes ones for me, and then obviously below that would be like Aladdin.
Yeah.
yeah, actually Rock and Rolla was the only movie that I regret not getting around to. So maybe I will get around to it eventually, just out of curiosity.
It's well, never mind. Well, we could talk about that some other time after you've
Yeah,
actually
yeah, yeah.
watched it.
No, for sure. But I think it's good to I think it's good to close on the kind of going through the filmography
Sure.
a bit. So for sure.
Yeah.
Um, cool. Yeah.